Welcome to a podcast by Kayleigh, the gateway to unlocking your unlimited potential. I'm creating an army of 6- and 7-figure makeup artists, and I want you to join me. In this podcast, I'm going to be crushing gatekeeping, opening the doors to the knowledge you need, and deep diving into the topics that can push us to the next level. Be prepared for epic guests and answers to the questions you have always wanted to know. No more small business, no more just a makeup artist. The beauty industry is a $250 billion industry, and you're in it. Let's get ready to open those gates. This is a podcast by Kayleigh. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of a podcast by Kayleigh. Today we are back with another episode for our mini mentorship series, and today we're going to be talking about mindset. Now, mindset is the module that is slap bang in the middle of the mentorship, and usually this is a week where it's kind of deemed as a week off. Now, don't get me wrong, anybody who's wanting to join the mentorship, you might be outraged and be like, oh my gosh, we don't want a week off, like I am paying you to teach me. But let me tell you, mindset is the most powerful work that you can do. And even though this week is technically deemed as a week off, it's a week off because there's no homework, but it's one of our most powerful trainings that we deliver is the mindset portion. Now, in the mentorship, we have two different types of wins, and I think I've spoken about this a couple of times. There are the students who get amazing wins like, Kayleigh, I booked 30 weddings, or Kayleigh, I earned X, Y, and Z, or Kayleigh, I worked with Nike, or, Gymshark. The reason I always mention Gymshark, by the way, is not an ad. It's literally because my water bottle is a Gymshark water bottle. And very often when I'm trying to think of examples, I literally look around me and all that I've got around me is Gymshark, a sausage roll from M&S, highlighter pens, and Weleda skin food, which is my hand cream. So I always pick the same four, so I do apologise for that. But anyway, there's those students. Those students get those wins, and those are great wins. Don't get me wrong, we don't want to poo-poo those wins. Those are great wins. But then we get the students who say, I conquered a block this week. I really changed my mindset this week. I've caught myself thinking differently this week. This is the first week where I've thought, damn, I could actually do this. And as the teacher of this program, those are the wins. And very often those students don't understand this, but those are the wins that take you to the next level. Because here's the thing, working with Nike, working with Gymshark, that's great, that's amazing. That could be like a massive bucket list goal. We definitely don't want to poo-poo that at all. But that is a moment win. Working with that probably isn't going to take you to the next level of your goals. But waking up and realizing what's possible for you, that's what takes you to the next level. So that's why this podcast today, where we're going to be talking about mindset, I don't want you to switch off, because I know 90% of the community do not understand the power of this simple word. The reason that I'm sat here is because of mindset. The reason that I have managed to triple my income, and I'm hoping to triple it again, is because of my mindset. Because working on my mindset was a really conscious decision that I've consistently made for the last 4 years. It is the students that have the mindset wins that go on to the next level. But very often there's students that say to me, Kayleigh, I don't have any wins this week. And then they pull that one out the bag and I'm like, little do you know, my friend, little do you know. So today we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about why I think mindset is kind of an epidemic, why I think most of the people in this community, most of the listeners of this podcast are sleeping on the power of mindset. But rather than going into it, because I have gone into this so many times, guys, you can literally listen to all of these episodes and I guarantee we touch on mindset. I know you're sick of hearing about why it's so important, but I just do want you to wake up and realize that it is your inner monologue that is controlling you. It is the way you react to things. It is the way that you think about yourself that is literally creating the path for your future. And it's why I always say my motto is take the pen, because we have the power to rewrite that. We have the power to rewrite what's possible with us. And it starts with our mindset. It starts with the belief in ourselves that we can. I hear every single day, and it's quite sad. It's quite sad that I hear this every single day, but I always hear people in my DMs, people in my comments, they'll tell me how nobody will ever pay me that. I'll never book that. Oh my gosh, I can never charge that. I'll never do that. I'll never be that. I'm not as good as her. I will never be that good. I hear this every day. It's really, really sad, but I've been there. Oh, I've been there. My biggest block, if I think about it, was, what will people say? Oh my God, they'll talk about this. They'll say really bad things. They'll take the piss out of me. That was my big block. And very often, if we look at our inner monologue, it's often 3 different things. So the blocks normally can be categorized in 3 separate ways. Category number 1 is fear. Fear manifests as, I've spoken about this before, fear of looking at your bank account. But fear can also manifest as fear of doing something, fear of being judged. I had fear. I had fear of being judged. I had fear of being talked about. I had fear of what others thought of me. That was my block in my 20s. That controlled me. It controlled every decision that I made in my business. I also had a couple of blocks like I wasn't good enough. How can I be an educator when I'm not good enough? Sometimes I have these blocks crop up now. How can I be an educator if I'm not doing makeup anymore? Those blocks come under fear. Sometimes these blocks can manifest as imposter syndrome or comparison. For example, I'm not as good as her. How will I ever book that? I'm not as good as X, Y, and Z. My makeup isn't as good as that. Or sometimes your block is knowledge related or lack related. I don't have enough money to invest in this. I don't have enough. I don't know. I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to create a website. All these things that I'm talking to you about are classed as mindset blocks. And think of it as literally like you are walking down a road and a giant tree is blocking your path. And you can't continue on your journey until you have gone around the tree. The block is the tree. And many of us do not continue on our paths, on our career journeys, because we're not going around the tree. We're not getting past the tree. So first piece of homework that I would love for you guys to do is to write down your block. If you're driving, feel free to write this down later on or think about it. Think about your main block. What is the one thing that your inner monologue tells you day in and day out? Maybe your block is not so business related. Maybe you have a few personal blocks as well. I would say at the moment, a lot of my blocks are probably more personal related than business, and that's what's holding me back. But I want us to together try and tackle this block. Here's the thing, guys, it ain't a one and done thing. You're not going to listen to this episode. You're not going to do a masterclass. You're not going to go to one singular session of therapy and be fixed. And we're not trying to be fixed. But blocks, they often come from somewhere. And we're not born with them. You're not born thinking you're not good enough. You're not born as a fresh little newly baked baby thinking you'll never achieve those things. Because very often a 3-year-old will tell you, I want to be an astronaut. But somewhere they learn along the way that they don't think they can be an astronaut. And the same thing happened to you guys. Somewhere along the way, someone made you feel not good enough. Somewhere along the way, you learned that maybe you might not earn that. Somewhere along the way, you somehow picked up on some insecurities. They might have been projected onto you. I got a lot of my body image issues projected onto me from teeny magazines back in the day. When I would read about, somebody would write into them, the teenage magazines and talk about their cellulite. And then I was like, wait, should I be worried about my cellulite as a 12-year-old girl? A lot of the blocks that we have but pushed onto us by other things, or we might have learnt them from experiences. For example, you might have come second in a race at school during sports day, and that might have given you the teeny block that maybe you're not good enough. The thing that I want you to understand is whilst we learnt these blocks, we can also unlearn a lot of these blocks too. We can learn new behaviours, more empowering behaviours, more empowering mindsets. And one thing that Alyssa Desai spoke on when she came on the podcast was creating a mindset that literally empowers you and acts like your best friend, that cheerleads you. And this is really hard because I don't know about you, but my mindset, whilst it's very, very strong, sometimes isn't my bestie. Sometimes that inner voice is not giving me the most empowering thoughts. And that's the aim of today, is I want you to become aware that the things that you tell yourself aren't actually true. A lot of them are just things that we've picked up along the journey of life, and we can choose to drop them. So there is a very, very popular graphic, and it's called the success cycle. This was taught to me by my own mentor, and it really opened my eyes to human behavior. Because very, very often mindsets and self-belief, it comes down to psychology and it comes down to human behavior. And this graphic really, really explains it well. So I want you to Google success cycle, and it's normally 4 boxes. And in one of those boxes, it says potential. And in the next box, it says action. And then lower, it says results. And then across from that, it says self-belief. So this success cycle is actually proven to be, well, we're in it. The long and the short is we are somewhere in this success cycle, but it can go one of 2 ways. So here is one way that it can go, and it's one way that I was actually pretty stuck in for maybe the whole of my 20s. So I believed that my potential wasn't that much. I had the will, I had the want for more for myself, but actually I didn't think I was capable of achieving it. So my potential, I didn't think was that great. So because of this, what kind of action do you think I took from my potential, my belief of my potential? Have a little think. Well, actually, I took crappy action. I took crappy action because I didn't believe the potential in myself was very good. So instead of going into a task with my full force, with my full belief in myself, I went into a task and I gave it reluctant results. I gave it reluctant action, I don't want to put too much into this because, I'm going to fail anyway. That was my mindset. So what kind of results do you think I got from that action? Probably not very good ones, right? Because if you take crappy action, you get crappy results. And what do the crappy results do for us? They lower our self-belief. What that then does is it lowers our belief in our potential, which makes us take even less action, which makes us get even less results. And it's a cycle. It's literally a cycle, and we're all in it right now. But you can change that cycle. You can reverse, you can flip the switch just by the simple change of understanding that your human potential is limitless. And that's a fact, right? I say this in my students, in my masterclasses, every damn day. Think of human potential. Think of what it's done for our world, right? We've gone into space. We've got these things called iPhones, which can do anything. The potential of an actual human being's brain is quite limitless. Your potential, listening to this, mine, is limitless. We can do anything. So what kind of action do you take when you really understand your limitless potential, right? My mentor, the same mentor that taught me the success cycle, really embodied into me that you need the belief that it is impossible to fail. You need that belief. If you believe in your potential, you're probably going to take more action, which means you're probably going to get better results, which is going to strengthen your self-belief. You can be in that cycle rather than the previous one. So really look at yourself right now. What side of the cycle are you in? Are you in the first one or are you in the second one? And do you want to flip the switch? Do you want to reverse Uno card it right now? I bet you guys do, right? You want to be taking massive action. You will always get the results from the output that you gave 9 times out of 10. Not always. Sometimes we give 100%. I gave 100% to that bride last year. I gave her every fibre of my being. I produced my best work. It was still the worst job of my life. But if you have a project, if you have a goal, if you have something that you're aspiring to, I want you to be really honest with yourself right now and ask, are you putting in 100% action? Because if you put in 40, if you put in 30, if you put in 10, that's the output, that's the result that you're going to get. So I want you to think of a goal that you have currently. Maybe you have a launch that you're working on. Maybe there's a masterclass that you're working on. Maybe there's a job that you really want to book. And I want you to give it 100%. Go in with the attitude that you can't fail. Go in with the attitude that actually you're a human being. You have a gigantic brain in your head. We're going to use it. We're going to put in 100%. And then see if you can flip the switch on the results that you're getting. So I really wanted to spend kind of the first half of the podcast episode talking about that cycle because it's literally proven, it's psychology. It really is your input and your output and your belief in yourself. But how do we strengthen that belief? What if right now the biggest thing that we're struggling with is the belief in ourselves, right? So let's talk about how we can strengthen our mindset. I've got a couple of exercises that I do inside the mentorship program. I actually have a brilliant training in the Level Up Club. It's actually everybody's favorite training of all time was the mindset training class that we did. So jump in the Level Up Club if you want to get that training. But I'm going to be talking about a couple of the exercises takeaways from that training on this podcast and why they're so important. And the first one that I really encourage us to do actually goes back to the block that we were just talking about. I want you to take that block. I want you to write that block down, the block, the thing that your brain, your limiting belief keeps telling you. It could be, I'm not good enough. I will never earn that. I will never make it. Whatever the thing is that your brain keeps telling you, I want you to write it down. The very first exercise that we do on Mindset Week and in that live training in the Level Up Club is called the why exercise. And what I get everybody to do is to write that block down and ask themselves why until they get to the base of that block. Most of our blocks actually come from childhood. Whilst we can also have experiences in our childhood that can shape our mindsets in a not so positive way, we can also have memories from our childhood that can shape us to be who we are today. And we got to have a lot of gratitude for those experiences too. But for now, I want you to take that mindset block and I want you to figure out why you've got it. Why do you believe that? So if your block is, for example, I will never achieve that. Why do you think you'll never achieve that? Why do you think that? Why do you think that? Why do you think that? Ask yourself that over and over until you can't ask yourself it anymore. And that there is your base block. That is your deep level block. And that is where what we need to find. That's what we need to discover. Because actually it's very, very hard for us to reshape or rewrite a top level block, because that's a lie. Most of us, our blocks are going to be, I will never earn that, or I will never achieve that, or I will never book that. But actually, when you think about it, when you actually remove all the emotion, why? Why will you never get to the Met Gala? Because others have. Other makeup artists, hundreds have made it. So why wouldn't you? Or I will never earn that. But why? Because actually somebody could come up to you in the street and give you like 1,000 or 2,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 pounds. You could win the lottery. Actually, that's not true. The block that you have is not true, but it's really hard to rewrite a lie. It's really hard to reshape and repaint the lie, which is why we want to get to the bottom of the block. We want to find the real reason that you have that block, because actually you can forgive that block. You can start to understand, okay, actually, I believe this because I had no money growing up. So why would I believe any different? You can start to repaint that, rewrite that, take the pen with that block, and your base block is your truth. That's the truth. It's very, very often never the case, I will never earn that. Sometimes it's almost never a case of, I will never earn that. That's always going to be the lie. So this is why it's so powerful for us to look at the tree in the middle of the road and start to go around it. And the only way we can go around it is by finding out the root of the problem, the root of the block, the root of the belief. And so many of these might come from childhood, but sometimes some of us might have had amazing childhoods with the best parents and the best supportive upbringing. But sometimes your block could come from a teeny magazine that tells you to be worried about cellulite. Your block might not be as deep as others, and that's okay. That's still valid. It's still important that you understand that it's not actually that you think you're ugly. It's that a magazine or society or movies or that stupid kid in school that called you ugly, that's the truth. And that is a lot easier to reshape. So that's a really good exercise that we do inside the mentorship and inside the Level Up Club. Another thing that I want to talk about is boundaries. I think boundaries and mindset are so linked, and I don't think I've talked about it yet on the mini mentorship, maybe in week 1. Boundaries, and for me in particular, mindset are so linked. My happiness and boundaries are like best friends. If I'm breaking my own boundaries, my mindset takes a big dive. So I really want us to do a little bit of work around boundaries. Some of us might be sitting here and we might not be very happy with our work right now. Our mindset might be quite low, not because of blocks, not because of self-belief, but because we're maybe a little bit unhappy in our jobs. Does anyone feel that way? I know I did. A few years ago in bridal, it was actually around kind of 2018, I'm going to say maybe 2019. Yeah, definitely that era. I didn't want to be in bridal anymore. And that's really a really interesting observation that came from that. Wasn't that I actually didn't want to be in bridal anymore. The bottom of that, the truth of that, was I had no boundaries. I was traveling sometimes 3 hours with a backpack because I don't have a car, so it was all on public transport because I had no boundaries. I was letting brides control the situation, and it was making me very unhappy. I was also working with the wrong type of brides because I hadn't done like my ideal client work yet. I had no boundaries when it came to communication. So brides were WhatsApping and calling me. I had no boundaries when it came to how much work I would take. So I would just take the work and be so exhausted. I had not a single boundary, and I didn't even know the word existed until maybe a couple of years later. And then I woke up and was like, wait, I wasn't actually unhappy in bridal. I was unhappy because I had no boundaries. And boundaries are so linked to our happiness. So some things that I did is I sat down with a notepad and I wrote down some of the things that made me unhappy about our jobs. And that's okay. What we have is a job. By the way, guys, it is important to acknowledge that sometimes that job is not going to make us happy. Sometimes not every client is going to be perfect. There are going to be times in our job where we are allowed to be a bit frustrated and unhappy with it. But there are a lot of things that we can do that can make those experiences few and far between. And boundaries are one of them. Boundaries have actually completely changed my mindset. So I wrote down a list of all of the things that made me quite unhappy. I also wrote down a list of all kind of the red flags that cropped up that I didn't really enjoy. So some of the things that made me unhappy was traveling. I learned about myself that when I was traveling on a packed tube on a sweaty Saturday in the middle of the summer, I was actually quite unhappy. I am so happy when I'm spending time with my loved ones, and spending 3 hours on public transport on a Saturday after doing a very mentally taxing job, it's not the one. It's not the one, is it, guys? Other things that were making me unhappy was getting out of bed like really, really early in the morning for very low pay. Going on those jobs where I took a rate that was obscene. I started to establish the things that were making me unhappy in my job. A beautiful thing about what we do is we have a lot of control over those things, right? Things that were making me unhappy on the by Kayleigh side, staying on my laptop until 9 p.m, having absolutely zero social media boundaries, mentoring at all times of the day, mentoring on weekends. And guess what? These are all things we can control. So I started to implement a few boundaries. So one of my biggest boundaries that made the biggest difference to my happiness was travel boundaries. I realized, okay, I don't mind traveling like 30 minutes. And yet that involves saying no to the brides that are maybe a little bit further out. But I just want to serve the ones that are in this radius. And oh my gosh, I never care about where a bride is now because they're in that little radius. I don't care about going on public transport because I'm only going to be on it for like 20 minutes. And wait, most of the time it's an Uber away because it's not across London. Sometimes I can even walk to the bride. But that's a wonderful byproduct of living in a big major city. I started to implement boundaries around when I would get off my laptop. So I knew I'm a natural personality type that will stay on it. So I set an alarm on my phone, 6 p.m. every single day I come off. One of my biggest boundaries that you guys learnt about in the last episode is that I will absolutely show up for myself before I start work. I only mentor in afternoons because that's when I'm awake, that's when I'm most happy, that's when I'm better at teaching. I only take trials on Wednesdays now because I was finding they were booking in on Saturdays, and that was making me unhappy because who wants to spend a Saturday doing a trial? I want to be out with my friends and family and dog. All of the things that made me unhappy, I went down the list and I asked myself, can I solve that? And I could solve all of them. It's not going to be a one and done thing. You're going to need to adjust them a lot. I constantly adjust my boundaries until I hit that kind of sweet spot. So don't take this as gospel, as in like what you write down, you might need to refine it a few times. But so many of us just think that that's the way it should be. You should be getting up at 4 a.m. for a bride, but you don't realize that you have freedom to say no. We have a lot of freedom in what we do. We're very, very blessed to be entrepreneurs because that means we can control quite a few things. We can control our email office hours. Mine are actually 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. because I don't want to be a slave to my emails, you know? I even have some very, very strict boundaries on the mentorship, and these ones aren't very fun to implement because sometimes, you know, on week 3, as I mentioned, it's one-on-one week, and in that week I have one-on-one calls, but sometimes students, they might forget. And sometimes I have to say to myself, listen, if you take on that call, week 4, week 5, even week 8, that is going to dip into your boundaries. And that is not what I preach. I can't be teaching these people to set boundaries and breaking my own. So sometimes I am really strict with my boundaries. And it sucks when I have to be, and it feels a little bit weird, but I'm getting better at that. When people test your boundaries, it's not fun having those conversations. Your opening times, your closing times, your minimum rate, your travel fee. These are all boundaries that should be respected. And if somebody is not respecting them, that's going to have a negative impact on your mindset if you break that boundary. So just understand that not every person has to be your person, and you don't have to book every single person that emails you. My mindset and my attitude towards bridal really changed when I implemented some of those boundaries. It was a really important exercise, was just sitting down and getting really clear on what do I actually not enjoy, and can we get a bit of control over that? So now I have boundaries over everything from when I start work to how often I take calls, how often I take podcasts. All of this is done to protect my mindset. And it's something that Alyssa Desai spoke about that really stuck with me when we did a mindset day with her in London. And she said she's actually very protective of her mindset. She said that it's her biggest asset, it's her biggest cheerleader. So she's going to protect it because her mindset protects her. And this really stuck with me. Your boundaries are almost your first barrier to protecting your mindset. If you're here and you're doing that mindset work, you should be protecting it. You should be really protective of it. I envision my mindset as like baby Kayleigh, like 6-year-old Kayleigh. That's who I imagine my mindset is. If you do anything from this podcast episode today, I want you to set yourself some boundaries, and I want you to be really strict on them. Imagine when you break them, because very often we're the ones that break them rather than others overstep them. When we break our boundaries, I want you to think of that baby you that you're not protecting. Be so protective of that mindset. You're here doing the mindset work, so let's protect it. Okay, I think I'm going to end there, guys. But if you really liked this episode, I really encourage you to jump in the Level Up Club, where we have so many mindset trainings. It's one of the biggest things that we actually work on, is just building that inner voice up to empower us, to make us badass. So this ties in really nicely with CEO Week last week, where, we're stepping into that CEO mindset, and this is part of that. You're here, you're doing that mindset work right now, and I'm really proud of you for that. Don't stop that. It's not a one and done thing. I have to continually work on my mindset, and it's tough. It's tough. Some days we don't want to do it, but I promise you, I want you to be part of that small percentage of makeup artists that push to the next level, that make 6 figures, that make £1 million. If you want that, this needs to be a priority. It has to be a priority for you guys. So I will see you next week. Next week's a fun one. We're going to be talking about websites. We do a whole week on websites in the mentorship, and it's a really fun week. I can literally see the light bulb moments that everybody has. So we're going to be bringing a little bit of that to the podcast next week. I hope you enjoyed this. Please do let me know your feedback and thoughts. Slide into my DMs on Instagram. I absolutely love having conversations with you. And let me know if you're enjoying the mini mentorship on the podcast. I will see you next week, guys. Bye. You have been listening to a podcast by Kayleigh. Thank you so much for tuning in today and being on this mission with me to self-improvement and taking steps towards financial empowerment. If you liked what you heard today, be sure to follow me on the gram @ByKayleighPodcast, where I post pretty much daily. I would also love to hear your thoughts, feedback, and energy. So please do leave me a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you are listening today. In the meantime, I want you to go forward, believe in yourselves, and be the change you want to see. Bye, guys.